Welcome back to the channel, everybody. Once again, I have John Matthew Leone from the 616 Comics. We talked last year about all the fallout, I guess, of the Penguin Random House changeover. There were some issues with shipping, and we actually got some positive outcomes from that one. Welcome back to the channel.
Hey, thanks, Wes. I really appreciate you having me. I've been a big fan. Been watching you for years, and congrats on all your success.
Well, thank you very much. Congrats on your success. I realize you just retired as well.
I did. Yeah, I retired last year, and me and the family and our management team and all our workers, we're doing this full time now.
Yeah, well, you and I both retired so we could go full-time comics. Apparently.
Yes, we retired from our government jobs, and now we're in a totally different space, and very thankful for that.
So there was an article that I wanted to talk to you about through the Tilting at Windmills newsletter that comes out on Comics Beat from Brian Hibbs, one of the more influential comic book retailers in North America. If you got FOC, it's because of Brian Hibbs. He has an article called "I Didn't Leave Floppies, Floppies Are Leaving Me," kind of talking about the overall health, I guess the future of floppy comics as he sees it. And I guess recently, Lunar Comics changed his discount from 55% to 50%, which kind of threw off his numbers, and he doesn't really see a viable way forward as floppy comics being a central part of your business. Now, I did want to get a retailer perspective. Now, I do want to point out there are some differences between you and Brian Hibbs. He's on the West Coast in San Francisco. I believe you're near Philadelphia.
Yes.
So he would definitely have more shipping costs incurred, when ordering floppies.
Yeah, I would imagine his shipping costs would be probably at least a third or more than my own, for sure.
Obviously, you're in the comic book game. You've got the 616 Comics. Do you see like floppy comics with the way that I guess distribution has been decentralized from Diamond Comics? Now we have Penguin Random House, we got Lunar, and we have Diamond still in the game. Has that ruined the viability of floppies moving forward?
No. I have a very positive outlook on floppies. I just think you have to go where the market is instead of, maybe looking at the way things used to be done. Brian Hibbs has been around, I would say, probably 15 times longer than my business. We haven't even been in business for 3 years. And I looked at the viability of the brick and mortar model, the traditional model that I have tremendous respect for. It's what I grew up with. I started collecting comics in 1982 when I was about 8 years old, and stopped for a little bit. But when I got back into it, man, I got all the way back into it, obviously, as you can see. And so I looked at a bunch of different models before we went into business. For about maybe 18 months, I researched it, and I have a totally different model than Brian Hibbs does. So we primarily do retailer exclusive variants, and we sell ratio variants. We will sell the occasional weekly book, but I only do heavy ordering on books that I think will sell well. So I don't carry a wide variety of weekly books. I might sell, like I have this Batman 126 here. People love homage covers. This sold very well, so I ordered heavy on this. And we sold a good amount of these. It's a great cover. But we have a totally different model. It works great for us. We've been growing like crazy. And I am disappointed that some retailers are getting kicked down on their discounts. But I don't know what the costs are for a distributor. I don't know exactly how much money they make or don't make. I don't know what their internal systems are as far as profitability and what it takes for them to move comics from one part of the country to another. So I can't really say whether it's fair or not, but I do think it's fair that there's discounts for volume. That only makes sense to me.
Yeah, they want to incentivize you to order more. If you order more, the shipping costs kind of even themselves out. So what you're doing is you're targeting a different audience more than likely than what Brian Hibbs is doing. He's got your traditional comic book shop, racks of new comic books. You come in, you get your week's worth of comics, and hopefully you go and maybe get some of the back issues, maybe a trade here or there, where you're specifically targeting a section of the audience that you think are more willing to throw down some money on collector's items and stuff like that. We've seen a lot of speculators in comic books, but really you're targeting collectors specifically with your brand and your approach to the market?
Yes, I would say that weekly comic book readers are going to tend more towards a store like Brian's than my own. We are very specifically tailored and very narrowly focused on collectors and people that like to buy exclusive comics that are more limited print than your comics that are produced en masse and go out to everybody for $3.99, $4.99, $5.99, or whatever. So, and along with the big giant orders that we have to place in order to get the retailer exclusives, we get a lot of ratio variants. So we like to offer the ratio variants at competitive prices. I would say we have extremely competitive ratio prices. I would argue we have the best ratio prices of any online retailer. That would be my observation from what I've seen. And we try to move a lot of volume. So we try to strike a nice balance between giving the customers a really good value, and we try to retain good pricing on our exclusives and our ratios, while still maintaining some margin so we can, pay our staff and keep the lights on, and I can feed my 38 dogs and 90 children and my wife. But Brian's model is so different. Like, I went on his YouTube channel. I did a little bit of research before coming on the show, just on his store. I went on his Instagram account, and the YouTube channel that he has primarily is promoting graphic novels. There's a very, very small margin in the graphic novel business for comic book retailers. It's essentially a book, right? So you're competing with Amazon when you're selling books. And I just don't think that you have the purchasing power to be able to leverage good discounts with the publishers when you're going up against Amazon, who can sell the same exact thing. So
you can't compete with Amazon. They can undercut every single person in the world.
Of course. Yeah. I mean, their purchasing power is just too great. So I purposely avoid areas where there is low margins and competition, which can dwarf me. I on purpose never go into those areas. So we focus on retailer exclusives. We try to work with the best artists in the world. We try to produce the covers that we wish publishers would produce, right? Because, I mean, let's face it, there's some publisher covers that come out that everyone just scratches their head and goes, how did this get approved? Couldn't you have done a better job on that? Couldn't you have gotten a better artist on that? This is a high profile title or whatever. So we work with artists we have a lot of confidence in, and we try to put out products that people want. Now, that's one avenue where you can go if you're a retailer and you're struggling. Now, you have to have a business plan in place and you have to have financing lined up, but because
that's a big risk, because the minimum order is 3,000 comics for one of the big two.
Yes.
Not exactly a small investment, and you are taking kind of all the risk unless you're partnering with another shop or someone.
Correct. And we have some excellent retail partners that we work with to help mitigate some of that risk. But there's a lot of options out there. I don't think the best option, and this is not to throw any shade at Brian, he's been around way longer than me. He's probably forgotten more about retail than I even know. I freely admit that. But I think that when your model isn't working, you need to shift your model. You need to change your model. So I think that, and I think he's aware of this, because the title of his blog is Tilting at Windmills, which is a vanity project, like screaming into the wind. So I think that he knows that this is kind of vain, what he's doing. But it was just very depressing to read, because I think that instead of taking the time to write that article, and there was a lot of effort put into that article, I would have put that effort towards trying to figure out what other sales channels I can utilize, what other types of products I can produce. Because as a comic book retailer, you are not limited to taking strictly what the publishers give you. This is a participatory game. So if I want to produce a cover that I want, I can give the publisher the exact layout I want, the characters I want, the position I want them in, and the artist that I want. So I can produce pretty much spot on what's in my head and what I want to sell to people. And so you're not limited as a retailer to just what the publishers are giving you. To go a step further, you don't have to accept a discount. You can negotiate hard, and someone with Brian Hibbs' purchasing power, and he's probably already done this, I negotiate directly with publishers to get better pricing. I've done it 3 times just this last week. So there's a lot of different things you can do. There's different sales channels you can operate on. There's whatnot. You can sell on Instagram. You can sell on Facebook. There's a million different options. So instead of just focusing on all of the negatives and, saying I didn't leave floppies left me, I just think the market has shifted and he has failed to adapt to the new marketplace. And I say that with charity. I love other comic retailers. I don't consider myself in competition with anybody except myself.
Yeah, we want to see everyone succeed, but yes. What might be happening might not be the death of floppies per se, but perhaps just a changing of the guard of the traditional thought of what a comic book shop is. And it needs to be more than that, because just having weekly floppy comic books isn't enough to drive in enough foot traffic for a lot of people in a lot of locations to really just kind of cover that bottom line and all the expenses and really make a nice profit to cover you and your company and keep building. That you need to go out there and directly target specific portions of the market that you know are profitable and really get the enthusiasm and the money generating.
Yes, exactly. And I think there's many different ways, and I'm not trying to give a seminar on ways that retailers can make money, but there's, so I went on their Instagram also, and in the last week there's a handful of posts, and none of them are promoting products that he has for sale that I could see. So I just think that in the age of social media, this is a tool that a lot of retailers don't optimize, right? So I can run my whole business on this tiny little supercomputer, which is really what it is. Mm-hmm. I mean, Wes, when me and you were growing up in the 80s, this type of computing power was not available to us.
When I was a kid growing up, the computer you got was a green screen, and you typed in like 8 different things to make the turtle move north.
That's it. Yeah, so I think that if you can properly leverage social media and influencer marketing, and you can adapt to new sales channels like Whatnot. There's a lot of comic retailers that are springing up all over the place just because of Whatnot. They reach out to me all the time. They're having incredible success on Whatnot.
Because you don't need to be limited by your region either right now. There are customers all across America and the world that are looking for these types of products. And if you know that they're there, you're not limited to San Francisco or in your case, Philadelphia. You can leverage that, out through the web, as long as you know like your SEO and you can get the word out.
Yes. Yeah. And that, it's a wonderful thing to be able to reach people all around the world. And I think that in today's market, you have to do that, because we are in the comic book industry. We are a subgenre of a subgenre of a subgenre. Like we're such a niche community. You really have to be in touch with where people are at with buying patterns and spending patterns, and where people are at in their life cycle and the popularity of characters or artists. And like I said, if you're aware of that, you can even produce your own comic books. You can partner with independent publishers or Kickstarter campaigns. Or I produced a book not too long ago that was just published by a writer. Joseph Schmalke, 7 Years in Darkness. He sent me the PDF. I absolutely loved it, and I committed to a big order of covers. We used Jay Ferguson, who's a tremendous artist. He produced a tremendous cover, and we put it out, and we did pretty well on it. And that was an example of me not working with the publisher, not working.
You are the publisher.
Yeah, I'm not working through a distribution channel. I worked with the writer. He did his books, and I did an exclusive on his title, and we were thrilled with that. And that's just there's so many different ways to succeed with floppies that reading his article was a little bit shocking to me. He
sounds very desperate, and it's kind of hard to sound desperate in the written word, but it's kind of like, oh my goodness, I can't believe what's happening. What had happened to the comic book industry underneath my feet.
Right. And I totally agree. And it's an interesting title, like I didn't leave floppies left me, or that's at least what I took from the article. That's interesting. It's not correct. It's interesting though to me that he would view it like that, because there's a lot of opportunities to succeed. in floppies. I would argue there's more opportunity now than there was 10 years ago, 20 years ago, 30 years ago. I just think that people aren't recognizing or leveraging the tools that are at their disposal in a way that would make them positive or optimistic. I think that they're focused on, you know what it reminded me of? I'll tell you what it reminded me of. And other retailers are going to know what I'm talking about. When you go on the Diamond's website to do your weekly FOC orders, that website looked like it was put together in 1983.
Yeah,
it's very archaic. It doesn't look updated. Reading Brian Hibbs' article reminded me of ordering on Diamond. That's what it reminded me of. And that's not
like the Mile High website where you could see they created one. They just haven't updated it for years, kind of thing.
Yeah. So, I mean, if you're, you get in or you get out what you put in. So if you have the right inputs, you're going to get good outputs, right? So if you're focused on how comics were being sold in 1995 or 2000 or even 2015, you're way behind the game. You have to be ahead of the market. You have to be looking for new opportunities and exploiting them in a way that's good for you, good for your staff, good for your family, mostly good for your customers. Because if it's not good for your customers, it's not going to be good for you or your staff.
So I did want to ask you real quick about DC Comics. We've been talking about the sales. And Larry, from Larry's Comics up there in Massachusetts, he normally kind of gives me a tongue lashing because he tells me these aren't definitive rankings. They're based on, I think, 120 stores that use Comic Hub, and they throw a little bit of some weighting on that and kind of extrapolate out what they think the top rankings are. And we're seeing some shocking things with DC Comics. I thought perhaps maybe based on what Brian Hibbs put in here, because the discounts have become have lowered. If you're on the West Coast, maybe you can't order DC Comics like you used to, and maybe there's just more Comics Hub customers on the West Coast weighted more heavily there than the East Coast, and maybe DC Comics sales really haven't bottomed out, at least at the bottom tier of characters underneath, like your Batman and stuff. What have you seen for DC sales? Obviously, you're a little bit closer to Lunar distribution and things like that.
DC's been a slog, to be honest. It's been a struggle. It's even when I discount DC books, it's still very hard. Outside of ratio variants, there's not much moving. And exclusives. We have some exclusive variants that do well, and then the associated ratios do well. But I would say, unless, like I showed this earlier, but these homage covers do great. There was a Batman 118, Spider-Man 1 homage by Victor Bogdanovich that did very, very, very well. This Guillaume March Batman 126 did well. There was a DC Killers, I think, by Brett Booth. That was a Todd McFarlane Batman homage. Man, sold tons of those. Outside of those, even stuff that should, like Failsafe's first appearance, even stuff that should sell great, and I think that did pretty well. Batman 125, but I think maybe a couple years ago it would have done even better. I do agree with you. It's so oversaturated with Batman that when a new big villain premieres with a brand new writer on a brand new arc, to me it didn't hit like it should have. So I pair a lot of DC cover A's or some of their regular variants with our exclusives, and I give them away. When you buy one of our exclusives, you'll also get one of these other DC comic books for free. I have found that is one of the only ways I can sell some of the regular DC covers. A lot of them, I'll be very honest, I probably pass on 95 to maybe 98% of DC's FOC every week. I don't even offer them.
You don't even buy them for the shelves?
Zero. I mean, zero. Most of the line items, if you look at my order sheet every week, zeros all the way down for DC.
Absolutely shocking, but that's not happening with Marvel because they look to be a lot healthier because it feels like they're leveraged on more characters than just like Spider-Man. It feels like they've got a lot of stuff going on with Hulk, Thor. There's some other top selling. It looks like the Mandalorian kind of hit pretty big. Really big.
Yeah, even the Mandalorian, the Adi Granoff main cover, gorgeous cover. That guy's a maestro. But that cover, man, we've sold hundreds and hundreds of those. And that's one where I was selling it right at cover price. Sometimes I'll discount them a bit and use other sales channels to move them. But I do think Marvel is in a much better place. They have the Star Wars universe. They do seem a bit more coherent than DC. DC seems to be DC seems to be running off in a million different directions.
Yeah.
Maybe this Dark Crisis will fix some of that, perhaps. I hope. I want, personally, I'm a huge DC fan. I really want them to succeed. I don't want these big publishers to fail. I understand the critiques that come from certain segments of the comic book fandom. I don't always agree with those critiques, but I think on the main, I do have hope for DC, because I think the new head, Zaslav, I think he is very focused on, as a business should be, profitability for your products and not other types of interests that you're going to use the comic book line to promote, which is good. I mean, if people want to promote certain things in their personal life, that's fine, like social or political agendas, that's great. But I think once that kind of swamps some of the main titles and that becomes the headline news every month, I think that's a problem for everybody, because you're hurting the fandom, you're hurting sales, you're hurting retailers. And I think there's a way to do it. I just don't think it's been done successfully yet by Marvel or DC. So I'm of the opinion that we need to focus on character development and story integrity. That's, I think, what you need to do with, and great art, for comic books. It's a visual medium. So get the best artists, which neither publisher, I think, focuses on as much as they need to, and get the best damn writers in there to get the best stories out. That's, I think, what needs to be focused on. And I think until that's fixed, people like Brian Hibbs are going to continue to write articles about losing a 5% discount. Because think about this. If Brian Hibbs was selling, if the comic book industry was super healthy, the industry in the main, not me, I'm a specialty retailer. The comic book industry in the main, if it was healthy, he would not be complaining about 5%. It would be a little bit of a...
It would be annoying. It wouldn't be devastating.
It's devastating because the overall health of the industry is in decline. Not permanently. Again, I'm very optimistic. I just think that this is a period of time we're going through where story is struggling, character development is struggling. And I think that when you have that, it impacts retailers ultimately, so that when you shift a discount, there's a sky is falling article that's written by the most influential comic book retailer, Brian Hibbs.
Yeah, it's very interesting stuff. So you're saying the death of floppies is greatly exaggerated. It's just become a little bit more of a specialty market.
Yes, and I think you have to adapt to that. You have to adapt to the situation on the ground. You know that as a former military person. You don't adapt to the situation that you want it to be in your mind. You adapt to your actual circumstances. And if you don't do that, good things will not happen.
Now, I know a lot of my viewers do like a very good cover here and there. You have an e-commerce retail website. What could they find on there this week? Is there anything they should be looking out for on the 616 website?
Oh, man. So much. We do have a Briar #1 Zoe Lachey exclusive set coming tomorrow. That's a series from Boom. That's coming up. We have a Harley Quinn Sabine Rich. Sabine's a wonderful artist, just like Zoe. Sabine Rich, Harley Quinn 30th anniversary special. It's a one-shot. Those are both launching tomorrow at 6 p.m. at the 616comics.com. And we launch probably 7 to 10 covers a week. I would say we do more retailer exclusives with our partners at Unknown Comics and our other retail partners than, I would say, probably than any other store on the planet. And I'm really proud of that. And that's a testament to my staff, not necessarily to me. My staff works hard. We work 7 days a week here.
Once again, I want to say thank you very much to Jon Matthew Leone from the 616 Comics. He's joined us in the past, and we had a very interesting conversation about the issues with Penguin Random House and some of the fix actions that came about because of that. Definitely check this out if you want some more information on the distribution issues within comic books. And if you're on a mobile device, there's a link in the video description.